Meanwhile, a reporter was in a broadcast in front of the tower as she greeted the viewers of the live attack site. A broad smile spread across her face. She has brown hair, and she is wearing a brown suit, both of which enhance her fair skin. Additionally, she had violet eyes. It has been 2 weeks since the tower was constructed, but no one has even been invited at this point, according to her news. Despite this, there are reportedly a large number of attackers in front of the tower. Therefore, she questioned both herself and the viewers from the site as to whether or not a hero would appear to attack the tower and halt the dungeon break. Shall we listen to their plans? The camera then turned its attention to a young man standing nearby. He was caught off guard by the unexpected exposure. "What a handsome attacker," she said. "Oh, I agree, Ms. Reporter. He had Viking gold hair paired with his golden eyes." The reporter was right when she said he looks like a celebrity. The reporter proceeded with the live broadcast despite having the strong impulse to simply stuff the young man into her luggage and dash to the nearest church for their wedding. To begin, she asked permission from the interviewee. The young man, on the other hand, was flustered and, at the same time, loved the praises the reporter made. So, he quickly agreed. A proud smile can be seen on his face. The first question focused on whether or not he believed an attacker would show up today, given that it had been 2 weeks since the tower had been built. In response to the question, full of confidence, he said no, that would not be possible. It is true that the tower is connected to the sword in some way, but it's also true that the myth hasn't been revealed yet. The people who were walking by did not like his answer, though. The young man poses on the screen one more time to show his quote-unquote handsomeness before he can even finish his statement of how handsome he is. It has been made known that the first floor of the Sword Master's tower has been cleared. The interview was cut off. You will no longer have the qualification to enter the Sword Master's tower. People were completely taken aback by what had just occurred. Their lips are parted and their mouth is open. Everyone stopped their own course, and everyone stopped breathing as if the world had stopped spinning. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how the broadcast ended. But we ask that you please stay tuned, dear viewers, as a screen adjustment is about to take place. Ads will begin after 60 seconds, and the show will air again. On behalf of the site of the attack management, I apologize for the inconvenience. Moving on to the backstage, the director and the cameraman were talking to each other. According to the cameraman, even if it's just the first level, and the fact that 2 weeks haven't passed yet, it is almost impossible for something like this to take place. In response, the director told him that perhaps the person who cleared it happened to have the right attribute. Or maybe he received a free pass. But the cameraman insisted that there was no way the person would be a ranker. So, they are down to the possibility that he is a monstrous rookie. Regardless of what really happened, it will be beneficial to them. This is a big scoop. Their eyes became as bright as the stars on a dark night, thinking that they were a few steps from success. Both of them become excited by that thought. They agreed that since the clear system window had just popped up, they might get an exclusive interview if they could quickly get to the entrance. The reporter liked the idea, so she hurried after them, abandoning the attractive interviewee, trampling on him even much. Such as pity, the world cannot see his good-looking face anymore. In her defense, the young man did not die. He was just sleeping. Sleeping. But that's odd. How come he just fell asleep on the floor all of a sudden? Did he faint? While the reporter was deliberating whether she should wake him up or not, the director and the cameraman was calling for her in a hurry. So, what should she prioritize? Help the young man or chase after the big scoop? Within a second, she was sprinting away. Now you know what's her priority, then. After the reporter left, the young man became conscious. What's surprising is he was calling for Dare Marcia, Eden's first teacher. A while later, Jungmann was found lying outside the tower. As memories from before began to play back in his memory, he frantically got up in panic. Did he clear it? He asked himself. That is when a hologram appeared in front of him. It was Eden. Eden asked him if he was finally up. To cover his concern for Jungmann, he called him a slowpoke. Well, it's true. Everyone was gone except him. When Jungmann realized that Eden was able to communicate with people outside of the tower, his eyes widened in surprise. Eden said it was possible. Because Jungmann was unsatisfied with Eden's response, he asked him more. So Eden had no choice but to explain. The only person Eden could talk with inside and outside of the tower was him. Jungmann sat there bewildered and speechless. He was confused, so he asked Eden the reason why. But Eden himself was unable to provide an answer. Even he was puzzled. Jungmann asked Eden because he believed that, as a member of the tower, Eden would be aware of everything. But it turned out that Jungmann was mistaken. Eden pumped his fist in the air to show his approval of Jungmann's performance from a little while ago, which, in Eden's opinion, was a fairly interesting one. On the other side, Youngman was not happy in any way. He faked a laugh. He believes that having Eden around him will be quite a nuisance, just as it was within the tower. Eden's eyes squinted as he pondered a thought. He smiled broadly as he placed his fingers on his chin and allowed his mouth to form a crinkle. As long as he stays with Youngman, he will not have the opportunity to experience boredom. Youngman was tired of Eden, so he decided that he should go somewhere else. But as an act of manner, he told Eden that it was nice meeting him before getting up to leave the place. Because Youngman was so fed up with Eden, he made the decision to leave him and go somewhere else. However, as a sign of good manners, he remarked Eden that it was a pleasure to finally meet him before getting up and leaving the place. But Eden had other plans. He wishes to follow Youngman, so I guess he has to deal with Eden a little longer. Youngman's smile faded. He is completely dumbfounded by what he has just been told. He was about to protest when something magical happened to his body. Blue light surrounded him. He was overflowing with mana. Youngman was in awe upon checking his status. His mana increased 6 times. Was it possible for it to grow so quickly? How could it have possibly grown at such a rapid rate? Regardless of the response, this is a fortunate occurrence regardless. He continued to read what was being displayed on the hologram. His brows furrowed, and a gleaming light flashed from within his eyes. Even his skills had advanced. He had leveled up 7 of them at this point. The smile was erased on his face when Eden spoke. He said that Youngman was such a simpleton. What a great way to praise someone, Eden. You surely know your words. Youngman furrowed his brows. He was not happy that Ethan could not give him a warning before saying something. It appears that Ethan did not feel sorry for Youngman. Instead, he labeled him a coward. In defense of Youngman, the truth is that anyone would be taken aback if they suddenly heard the air talks. Well, I completely agree. Eden changed the topic before Youngman got pissed at him. In return for teasing him, he delivered good news. He did not just give Youngman new skills. There was more. He told Youngman to check his stat window. At first, Youngman didn't because he had literally just checked it a few seconds before. Why would it be necessary for him to check it once more? But guess what? Eden's temper made him do it. His eyes became big as soon as he saw his stat window. Eden lowered his head and grinned smugly to himself as he closed his eyes. He had finally found the reaction he was looking for. Youngman's limits on mana using actions have disappeared. For him, this is considered a cheat talent. In that case, joyfully, Youngman stands to his feet. He made Eden follow him. After a fresh change of clothes, he was found walking inside an establishment. He tapped his ID and walked past the entrance. Eden caught up on what Youngman was trying to do. He verified it by asking if he would train right after clearing the tower's first floor. How diligent, he says. But, much to his dismay, Youngman said no. His purpose in going there was to check his combat ability level and his newly acquired skills. The establishment he went to was the first test center. A curse was heard. Hero's mana has detected the use of mana. Youngman started to sweat a leak crazy. A look of nervousness crosses his face. And then, out of nowhere, a soda can came flying past him, headed straight for his face if he didn't manage to dodge it. But since he did, it went straight to the wall. A voice called him. It was a man with a creepy smile on his face. Han Yujel. Youngman stood in terror. Han Yujel is a tall man with a darker complexion compared to Youngman. His hair was brown, and his presence reeks of evil. Yujel greeted him as it had been a long time since they had seen each other. Youngman twists his neck to glance over at him without fully rotating his body. It makes sense, given how easily he can run when things go wrong. The expression on Youngman's face was permanently glum. Why is it that I have to deal with this jerk once more? He was thinking. Contrary to Youngman's gloomy face, Yujel had a sly smile on his face. Han Yujel was Youngman's classmate in the academy. He possesses a rare ability that is extremely uncommon and unmatched by anyone else. The majority of the time, a person who has not seen his classmate in a very long will be excited to catch up with him. But Youngman does not feel this way at all. He was rather terrified. Shall we go for a round in a while? Yujel asked. As soon as Youngman heard his invitation, he stood perfectly still in his place. His mouth was hanging open in shock, and his eyes widened with dread. Memories flashed before his eyes. Yujel can be seen beating the student Youngman with his sword. Youngman flew on the floor. Yujel spoke. He said Youngman that he initially feared him due to the fact that he was somewhat a bit smart, but after engaging in some little sparring with him, he saw that Youngman was nothing special at all. He even mocked him as a nerdy jerk. Student Youngman was found lying on the cold ground, covered with cuts and bruises, with blood pouring out of his nose. With this condition, he must have broken a bone or two. For his last statement, before leaving the place, Yujel advised Youngman that he shall not snitch on masters. After reliving all of those memories, Youngman found himself filled with rage. He cursed Yujel. He had no idea that they would meet again. He should not have seen this jerk. Now, his day is ruined. Youngman curled his hand into a fist. As Yujil moved his face closer to Youngman, he revealed an evil grin to the young man. At this moment, Youngman's anxiety was causing him to break out into a cold sweat. He murmured some phrases, which Yujil found amusing to mock. Yujil dubbed Youngman an idiot because of his actions. Yujil had a firm hold on Youngman's collar, and he was suspended in midair as a result. Youngman did his hardest to free the wicked man's grip and get away from him when someone noticed them, particularly Yujil. Because he was wearing the academy uniform, he regarded both of them as wild. Yujil was taken aback by the surprise. His pupils drew further apart, and the corners of his mouth turned downward into a frown. He cannot afford Choi Bam-jun to notice him, so he threw the poor Youngman on the floor. When Youngman got up, he leaned over to him and whispered something in his ear. He told him that today was a lucky day for him, but that he had to get himself ready for the next time they saw each other. Following that, he purposefully bumped his shoulders, which caused Youngman to grimace and then walk away like nothing happened. Youngman was shaking, be it because of fear or because of anger. But no matter what, he has to hold himself back. No good will happen if he chases the jerk and fights him off. And he must focus only on his evaluation. That was his sole purpose of going there. Yujil just happened to pass by and pissed him off. But Eden had other ideas. He was so angry that he called Youngman an outcast. From his point of view, Youngman should have smacked him somewhere on the back of his head, at the very least. But Youngman stands by his decision. He chose peace over violence, so he let Yujil find his way to the exit. But Eden is still not done with his sermon. This time, he is venting his fury through fire. Like, literally. Give it a rest, Eden. The gate is opening. Youngman pulled himself together and decided to forget the scene earlier. He should be bothered by that jerk. Right now, he should focus on his evaluation alone. He stands in the middle of the room. Iris recognition was performed by the system. After that, his name was processed, and the system greeted him in the chamber where the practical combat test was being conducted. Then, they asked Youngman about the difficulty level he wanted. A smirk curved on his lips. Set difficulty 2. His eyes were blazing fire, and his aura screamed victory. Lowest. Eden looked so done after hearing the difficulty level Youngman chose. Why does he have to act so cool after choosing the lowest difficulty? He thought. Does he even have pride left on his body? In his defense, the system will adjust the difficulty level based on his ability and magic anyway. Therefore, it is essential that he will make a measured ascent. After acquiring Youngman's physical ability data and analysis complete, an F-class monster Golbat was summoned. Different weapons appeared then. Youngman has to pick from one of these options. He pondered a thought. To confirm his stats, the requirements should be the same as when he was a student. Right? After a while, he decided to pick the sword as his weapon. After the weapon of his choice had been perceived, his eyes grew in shock. It is hard for him to comprehend that he was able to hold a sword with just one hand and with no effort at all. Is it because of his skill? He thought. He raises the sword high above his head. His body feels light, precisely how it was before when he used immersion. As he positioned his body into a fighting stance and held the sword in front of him, a smile began to form on his face. Let's see how much he has changed since then, shall we? The Golbat was flying above his head, so he raised his sword, and with a single slash in the air, the Golbat was cut in half. His previous record of defeating the monster was 32 seconds, but this time he just needed 3 seconds to do it. Therefore, because the record is now shorter, the level of difficulty will have to increase. Youngman was flying over the moon. He was so proud of his achievement. I mean, who would not, right? He reduced the time by 29 seconds. He boasted about his victory to Eden, but Eden was unimpressed because it was only over a Golbat. Despite that, he advises Youngman not to let his guard down. And Youngman totally agrees. It is forbidden to let his guard down. This time, a huge wolf appeared. It was 10 times bigger than those he encountered in the supermarket. Its claws were as sharp as knives, and his eyes glistened with hunger. But Youngman did not let himself get discouraged. Rather, he mustered all the confidence he could and fought the monster. In the meantime, those who were watching the fight were completely awestruck. Yujil, who was seated on a bench at the time, became annoyed as he heard murmuring all around him. He wondered what was going on. When he looked back, his eyes landed on a familiar face, which shocked him. It turned out to be Choi Bam-jun. He was the 0th generation attacker who managed to attack the Tower of Zeus, the god of thunder. He currently possesses 7 unique skills. Bam-jun seems to be in his mid-40s. Stumble was visible on his jaw. His very presence exudes a sense of refined elegance and grace. Yujil got up from his seat and took the opportunity to approach the man. Seeing how carefully he tried to open a conversation and how nervous his face was, makes us think that this man is someone important. Because of too much nervousness, He called the teacher by his name. He must be embarrassed by what he did. That was rude. Anyway, Yujil expressed to teacher Bamjoon his interest in receiving instruction from him. He inquired as to whether or if he might view some of his previous sparring clips, but teacher Bamjoon declined, stating that it would be impossible to do so because he had just discovered an interesting friend while watching the match. Certainly, that friend would be Youngman, a person who catches Choi Bamjoon's attention. Yujil asked himself, "Are you in denial, Yujil?" It's too obvious that it was Youngman. After taking a closer look at what teacher Bamjoon was watching, he came to a conclusion that Nerd Han was the person in question. On the other hand, teacher Bamjoon pressed a green button and tested if Youngman was hearing him. Youngman responded with a pardon, which confirmed that he could hear from teacher Bamjoon from the inside. Seeing the turnout of events, Yujil began to panic and oppose the teacher. From the inside, Youngman was found clueless. A little while ago, a small smile was plastered on teacher Bamjoon's face. He is indeed interested in Youngman. Finally, someone saw the potential in him, of course, aside from us. Youngman, on the other hand, was still inside, fighting for his life. For more information, the virtual test room controls all 5 human senses. If it wants you to feel cold, then you will feel cold. If it wants you to feel hot, then you will feel hot. A person might even vividly feel the pressure of death pressing down on them. Because of this, the vast majority of those being evaluated are overcome with intense dread, but Youngman is not one of them. Even teacher Bamjoon was able to see that. Despite of the huge monster in front of him, we are able to see that he is still standing on his ground without showing the slightest bit of fear. Teacher Bamjoon says that evaluees usually try to evade and go for it. The teacher was puzzled. Is Youngman truly without fear, or is he just ignorant? Shall we see for ourselves, my dears? Now, coming back to the present when teacher Bamjoon pressed the green button and caught Youngman's attention. Youngman can be seen on the large monitor confused, but the reason was he did not expect to hear someone's voice from the outside. Looks like Youngman found a teacher for himself, though. Teacher Bamjoon started to coach Youngman. He told him that he must go a bit further before he would be able to discover the weakness of the creature. Youngman becomes more confused. What in the world that guy was talking about? He must have thought. At first, Youngman questioned the advice, but then he decided to just give it a go. After all, he had nothing to lose, just his life, I guess. Youngman prepared for an attack. He held his sword in his right hand and sprinted toward the monster. As he jumped towards it, he made a slash against its surface. That is when he realized that it was shallow. As the realization dawned on him, his eyes widened. There was something on its nape. Could it be what he was looking for? Could it be the monster's weakness? After giving it some more consideration, Youngman believed that he was right. Now, what he has to do is aim for it deep and strong. In that way, he can take down the huge wolf. Youngman focused his eyes on the opponent as he ran toward it. He gripped the sword in his hands tightly and made the attack. The monster let out a piercing scream of agony as Youngman's blade moved across its skin. Youngman stands victoriously. Within 4 minutes and 50 seconds, he defeated Iron Wolf. People cheered from outside of the monitor, but teacher Bamjoon hits differently, though. He threw a fist in the air with a proud smile on his face saying, "That's how it's done. If I was Youngman, I would throw a party for that compliment. That must feel nice." On the other hand, Yujil appeared to be frozen in place, as if he had just seen a ghost. After seeing Youngman battle, it left him feeling more than just astonished. It dawned on him that, compared to when they were at the academy together, he had come a long way since then and that he was now more than capable of doing things on his own, including beating him. "You must be afraid now, Yujil. Poor soul." He furrowed his brows, and his lips curled downwards as sweat began to roll down his face. Is that really Han Youngman? He asked himself, but it seemed like thoughts escaped from his mind. Teacher Bamjoon overheard him and inquired as to whether or not he was familiar with Youngman. Yujil turned his head and tried to avoid answering the question. But he could not lie in front of the teacher. It will make him look bad. He is bad, though. So he just said he knows Youngman a bit. Youngman, a little while after, was found walking out of the other. He was clenching his arm as his shoulders sagged farther and further. It seems as though he has just returned from running a 20-kilometer marathon. Eden didn't stop making fun of him despite the fact that he looked terrible. He burst out in laughter as he teased Youngman about how weakling he was. "Well done for being a weakling," he says as he laughs his heart out. Youngman put on a glare, annoyed by Eden mocking him every single opportunity he could take. As Youngman made his way past a group of individuals, he was deep in thought. If what he says is true, his growth has been relatively slow. May this be because he took a break for the past 2 years. If he had just trained his body more, he would have been able to make freer use of the immersion ability. Then, he would have used his unique ability with Eden. Youngman laughed when he realized how arrogant that guy could be. The only thing he can do is hope that his arrogant personality does not get immersed in him. His attention was caught when someone called him. It was Teacher Bam-joon. He shared with Youngman his observation that he had been watching him fight earlier, and that he thought he was really excellent. Also, he noted that Youngman employed swordsmanship similar to that taught in the academy, so he had no choice but to ask him if he was an enrolled student. However, Youngman did not respond to his query since he was unsure of who he was speaking to at the time. So, Teacher Bam-joon told him that he was an academy official. He was shocked not because he learned that he was talking to someone from the academy, but he was rather shocked by Yujul's presence from behind. As Teacher Bam-joon looked at Youngman, he tilted his head to the side to avoid making eye contact. He explained to him that although he has attended the school in the past, he is not there at the moment since he is on a leave of absence. Additionally, he told him that the instructors did not teach him properly. Teacher Bam-joon was disappointed. Are they discriminating against the students openly? He thought. Yujul, at that point, took a side glance at the teacher. The color drained from his face as beads of sweat began forming. So the academy instructors are that kind of people, Teacher Bam-joon adds. Then, a smile flashed on his face as he placed his hand under his chin as if he was deliberating something. Should I teach you, then? He asked Youngman. On the other side, it appears that Yujul is opposed to the idea. His expression was one of rage and disapproval at the same time. Of all the people, why does it have to be Youngman? Teacher Bam-joon pushed Youngman more to take up the offer that was presented to him. If he is willing to be his student, in exchange, the instructor promises to teach him every technique he requests, aside from swordsmanship, hand-to-hand combat, and even spear tactics. Youngman's mouth dropped on the floor as his eyes became bigger, the size of a golf ball. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. But at the same time, every part of his body was tingling with excitement. At the thought of being able to enhance his abilities, gain new skills, and learn from the instructor in an appropriate manner, in contrast to what he had experienced during his times in the academy. To feed his curiosity, he pondered this thought. If this man can teach him everything, then that means he is an all-master class. But there's no way he could be one, though. He raised his hand and politely declined. The reason for this was not only that it seemed as though Teacher Bam-joon was lying, but rather that if he was truly capable of teaching all of the skills, then he must pay at least 30 million for the classes, which means that he would be a slave for the rest of his life until he dies. But Teacher Bam-joon caught up with his thoughts. As expected, Youngman does not believe him. Dumbfoundedly, Youngman agreed. So he had no choice but to make Youngman believe him. What he will do is he will personally examine and determine what suits him the best. Adventurer's eye is trying to look into your information. Youngman stood unmoving and unblinking. An outsider is trying to infiltrate the original author of the story. Sounds of Teacher Bam-joon's walking can be heard echoing through the void. When he learned that Youngman's magic was nothing extraordinary and that there was nothing exceptional about Youngman, a question mark began to form in his thoughts. That is impossible to happen. This was the very first time he had encountered someone such as that. In any case, it makes little difference because he can easily dig him up and throw away, like leftover foods from dinner. Adventurer's eye is trying to look into your information. As the scorching anguish spread throughout every part of Youngman's body, his face crumpled up like a piece of paper. At this time, he is unable to take a breath. It's as if an elephant were sitting on his chest, and millions of horses were running inside his heart. It's severely uncomfortable. Youngman thought of the reason why Teacher Bam-joon was doing this thing to him and what exactly he was doing inside his body that he was in terrible pain. Youngman was totally annoyed by what was happening, so he thought that he should make every effort to expel the teacher from inside his body as quickly as possible. The hero's magic is protecting you, retaliating against the opponent. This took Teacher Bam-joon completely by surprise. He did not anticipate that this event would take place. Now, the adventurer's eyes is going back at him. When he thought about how interesting Youngman was, he broke into a cheeky grin on his face.